We currently don't have any sponsors, so until we do, this podcast is brought to you by Happy Mind Wellness Company, a place to find your happy. If you live in Colorado and are looking for mental health support, visit happymindwellness.com for more information. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a licensed professional counselor, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, and creator of this podcast. I am so grateful that you decided to join me today, and you aren't the only one. Today, we are joined by Sadie, one of my closest friends, and we are going to dive deeper into who she is and the journey she's been on so far in life. We talk a little bit about body awareness, listening to our inner voice, and there is a little bit of a mic mishap partway through, so please bear with me as I figure all of this out. It is only episode 2. Also, as a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. So let's dive deeper, see if we can get a little uncomfortable, and create some insight today. Sadie is one of my oldest, most consistent friends in my life. She is a licensed massage therapist who is currently running her own business in Durango, Colorado called Four Corners Abdominal Therapy and Massage. You can find more information about her business at 4, as in the number 4, cornersmassage.com. She is also about to enter a master's program for mental health counseling. She has had an incredible life, and I have loved being a part of her journey. So today, she has agreed to share some of that journey with us. Welcome, Sadie.
Hi. Oh, bye.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
You. Yeah, thank you for having me on here. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. And I know that this is going to be the first of many episodes that we have together. Uh,
Yes.
every time we talk, it's and this topic, and this topic, and this topic, which is why I wanted you to be the first person I talk to, because you will definitely be a recurring voice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited. And I feel like at this point, we're going to have material for like the next 5 years. So,
I am completely okay with that. So, starting off, I want to hear a little bit more about where you're from and a little bit more about your upbringing.
yeah. So, nice, broad question to start.
Super broad.
Yes, we love it though. So much room for interpretation. Um, yeah, so I'm originally from a small town in southwestern Colorado, Cortez. It was very pretty rural, also, pretty conservative growing up in that area. And I think like a big part of my upbringing, or at least what has kind of like influenced my journey a lot, has been being raised like in the evangelical church, but then later leaving that. And I recognize that it's, a religion or a practice that works for a lot of people, but also in my experience, contributed to a lot of the trauma and stuff I've worked through in my life.
Mm.
And so it's been really interesting trying to come to my own inner voice and return to it. And, what this whole episode is about, or this podcast, is finding insight and finding that inner voice. And it's been a really difficult journey getting there.
Yeah.
Um, just because a big part of the way I grew up, the way I was kind of given this version of Christianity, was all about like outsourcing my intuition and my knowledge, and
Mm.
having to look to an external teacher or source or person to basically tell me like how I should be living my life, what was right or wrong, what I should think, what I should believe, what I should feel. And it ultimately, like, suppressing my own inner voice and my own truth, led me to deal with a lot of things around a lot of shame, as far as I identify as bisexual. So a lot of shame around that, as well as just being really disconnected from my body, myself, and my intuition.
You said so many key things there. But follow-up question for you, because you said that you really had to suppress a lot of that. And this is kind of coming back to your inner voice. Do you have a memory or an example that really stands out in your mind of where you did outsource your inner voice and either you knew it in the moment and you're like, why am I doing this? Or you had no idea. And now looking back, you're saying, wow, I was using their inner voice and what they thought I should do as opposed to what was right for me.
Yeah, definitely. I can't think of like a really clear like in the moment realizing that that's what was happening. I think most of it's been in hindsight. Um, yeah, because at the time it was like I was just doing what I was supposed to, and looking back, like I mean, a big one was basically just pretending to be straight, all the time. And a big part of what happened was like looking back, I felt very I wasn't in my body most of the time. I was very dissociated a lot of the time. It felt like I felt very constricted throughout my body. Um,
Mm.
and also just like a lot of physical symptoms of like anxiety and depression came up with that. And like in those choices, everything felt so stressful.
How did that stress affect your mental health journey?
Oh my gosh. I think without it, there wouldn't have been a journey.
That's fair. That's completely fair. That is your journey of
That is my journey.
this
Um,
realization you had.
yeah, I remember I mean, now I look back and I remember in like high school or even middle school, like now I know that they were panic attacks, but at the
Mhm.
time I was just like, you know, sometimes at night I just can't breathe and I'm probably
Oh,
dying. Um, and
that's so scary.
yeah, it was really scary. And I was like, yeah, I felt like little me. I'm like, no, it's okay. Like you had a lot going on.
You had this suppression, this disconnection from your body. All of these symptoms were happening that you knew something was wrong. You knew something didn't feel good. How long did it take you until you had the insight to go, oh, this is anxiety. Oh, this is me pushing my voice down. Oh, I have so much to do and work on and learn about myself.
Oh my gosh, I don't even. I mean, it was a long time. I think specifically in college was when I very first, and it was when I very first sought out mental health support through the form of therapy. But it wasn't so much like even I wasn't even able to recognize like, oh, I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling depressed. It was just this overwhelming feeling of I am not going to survive this if something doesn't change. And at that point, like I truly believed I didn't deserve to be happy in life, which is wild to think about now because I'm like, it's not something that needs to be earned. Um, but at the time it was like I remember thinking like I still don't think I deserve to be happy because at that time ultimately because of my sexuality. Um, but I need to do something different because otherwise I will not survive.
And for the sake of putting it all out there and being vulnerable and uncomfortable, when you say, I will not survive, what do you mean?
Yeah. Well, for me, my biggest thing that made me feel like that was like I had a pretty severe eating disorder at that time in college. So I physically felt terrible all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I really think that like if I hadn't found the courage to take my struggles to a professional, I genuinely don't think I would have gotten to a place where I would have been able to get better and healthy. I don't think I would have lived anymore.
Yeah, that your body just slowly would have shut down more and more until it couldn't keep going.
Yeah, yeah.
And now I know this story because I've known you for so long, but I'd really love for you to share it here on the podcast today because you went to a professional and it was not helpful. And then a bunch of stuff happened, and then you went, oh, I should go back. Can you tell a little bit about that journey and how sometimes seeking professional help isn't the only step in the process?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I don't even know what year it was because it's all a blur, but earlier in college, I I think I did at some point realize I was having anxiety and depression just because I was like always on edge and like I was depressed. Like I think I did have that recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, great. I'm gonna go to a therapist to just work on those things only. I'm only gonna go there for depression and anxiety, nothing else. Um, so of course, when they did the intake, I withheld a lot of info. I was not truthful about having an eating disorder. I wasn't truthful about basically having a bunch of shame around my sexuality. I actually remember in the intake, one of the questions they asked was, what are some of the lessons you've learned from your parents? And I was listing all of these positive qualities, and
Mm.
the intake person said, they don't all have to be positive. And it blew my mind. I was like, that's an option. I don't know what you mean. My parents were great. They tried their best, which they did.
That doesn't
And
mean it was helpful the whole time.
yes. Um, and so I went into therapy, with the therapist thinking that, all we were working on was depression and anxiety, primarily around school and like um, academic performance.
Mm.
And I wasn't able to open up at all, really. And it wasn't really helpful. And at some point, I just like pretended to get better. I just like suddenly was cured and graduated myself from therapy. And then a few years later, obviously things did not get better. In fact, they got worse.
Yeah.
And you know this, I have a habit of like when I rarely drank, I would just come out to everyone. And that was, looking back, it's kind of funny and kind of cute. But
In the
at the time,
moment,
it
it
was,
caused so much pain.
yeah, at the time, it was like so, like, it caused me so much shame and it was so scary. And I didn't know how to like handle that in my own life. And so I forget what happened, but basically it was after one of those nights where I like came out to a bunch of people when I was like slightly intoxicated,
Mm.
and then that triggered some eating disorder behaviors that I won't get into.
Yeah.
And then that next morning, I remember distinctly having that thought of, I will not survive this. I don't think I deserve to be happy, but I need to do something different. And then I took myself back to the therapy clinic. Um, we had to redo the whole intake because it'd been over a year or something, and I actually told them everything that I was dealing with. Um,
Yeah.
and they set me up with like a professional seasoned therapist, not a grad student, because they were like, "Ooh, we need to bring in
Yeah.
the professionals for this one."
You decided that you weren't just going to find professional help, but you were going to show up as you were and pick that harder, more vulnerable path.
Yeah, and it was, I think, during that like in between time between the first therapist and then when I went back, I had kind of had this realization that I think a lot of my anxiety and depression and issues around eating are related to my sexuality.
Mm.
And it like I had enough insight in that moment to be like, I have to tell them this because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's actually important, even though like I didn't want to. And the great thing is like I was paired with a therapist who um she didn't push me to talk about that right away. It was quite a while before then I got to a point where I was like, I think we might need to talk about this soon, but I'm not ready yet. And she was basically just like, I agree.
I'm so glad you found someone that fit for you and
Yeah.
was willing to trust that boundary.
Yeah. And I think also just someone who was like so gentle with that. And I think like realized that this was such a big thing for me at the time that um even though it was like kind of like the root or like the root of everything, we had to do a lot of other care and like
Mm-hmm.
practice a bunch of other skills around like confronting like shame and like accepting what is and actually just being able to name my emotions in the moment
Mm-hmm.
before I would be anywhere close to being able to approach this bigger thing.
Yeah, even if you know that's the thing that is kind of the root of all my struggles and all my pain, if you're not ready to go there, and I find this a lot, not just within myself, but within all of my clients that I work with, when they first start therapy, it's almost this expectation of, I have to get it out. I know
Hmm.
what it is, so I have to say it. I have to tell all the details. And that's not true.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that your body is ready to take those details. And if you're not ready and you can't even handle the symptoms that it's causing yet, what makes you think that going there is going to help in the first or second session? It's
And
not.
yeah, sorry to cut you off.
That's okay.
Um, I also think too, a big part of it was like building that trust and rapport with my therapist as well, because it was like I knew I could trust her with these. I mean, at the time they also felt big, but these smaller things.
Hmm.
And so it was like building that gradually, and then, and like I said, also having more skills to sit with the discomfort or to be able to face stuff
Hmm.
without completely falling apart. And I think if, if she had immediately jumped into like, well, this is the core, we got to get to it, I think I don't know that I would have gone back.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize something because I was in your life at this point, but
Yeah.
I was not privy to any of this information.
Yeah, no
You
one
never
was.
came out to me.
Nope.
You were coming out to kind of strangers, but not the actual people in your life that were around for it. And, I think, and please correct me if this does not resonate with you, but there's almost this, she helped guide the way of, oh, I could tell her and it was okay. And I didn't have to go there right away. And then when I was ready to go there, I can go there. Maybe I can start telling other people too, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, totally. I think, yeah, and it just makes me think of how a lot of like what therapy in my mind should be. I know, like, shouldn't, whatever. In my mind, like what role therapy plays is a place to practice new skills and to practice being in relationship with
Mm.
someone in a different way. And I think, yeah, a big part of that was like learning that there are safe people, and that like you can be not just like tolerated, but like accepted and loved and like supported with through whatever. And so I think, yeah, it opened up this like possibility of like, well, if my therapist is like that, even though I'm like, I mean, paying her to do this thing, like maybe other people are
Mhm.
also like that in my life. But yeah, I totally agree.
So with that, I'm actually tearing up a little bit because I have no memory of this conversation except like of my side of the conversation. But the day that you did come out to me and my reaction to it, I have no memory of that happening, but just how there is just, it's not just I don't accept you or I do accept you,
Yeah,
but there are other options out there.
yeah.
Uh, so I would love to hear that from your perspective since I actually have no memory of my side of that conversation.
I think it's so funny that you don't have a memory of that because it was like so monumental for me. And it was like, and you're like, oh, just another Tuesday. I don't know.
It
Um,
was just another Tuesday for
I
me.
know, but for me it was like a big deal. Which actually I was just about to like tell the story anyway, so I'm glad you brought it
But also,
up.
wait, pause real quick though, because I just want to again just point out how it's so different from different perspectives. Like that was such a monumental moment of your life. And for me, it was just another Tuesday to the point that I don't have it committed to memory.
Yeah.
And it just, everyone is on their own journey. And even if you go through the same thing, the way you view it is so different.
Yeah, I totally
And
agree. And which is
yeah.
why I find it so funny because it is just like this was a huge like a core memory from like Inside Out, like a big core memory for me. And you're like, oh, I'm just Tuesday, whatever, just hanging out with my friend. Now I just know more about her. All right, so story time. Um,
Love it.
from my perspective, basically like, and I don't remember like everything like leading up to it, or
I know
I
we were
just
walking
remember.
back from class to our
And I
cars.
remember we walked through the art building. I do remember that.
I do remember that.
Um, but I mean, I don't remember like how I decided like that was the day, or I'm sure I talked to my therapist about like, like I wanted to or something like that, but I don't
Mhm.
remember the details around like what I decided.
I
I just
remember you
remember,
telling me after the fact that she kept getting upset with you because you kept not telling me and it kept
that
being a
sounds right.
plan and then you kept not doing it. And she's finally like, you are about to graduate. You have to do it at some point. Come on.
I do. Yeah, that sounds like me. I don't remember that, but that sounds exactly like me. Yeah, so I finally was like, okay, it's happening. And in my mind, I think I prepared these like two options basically for you. Like you had a script that I had in my head that you were gonna go one of two ways, which was like, oh, I like, wow, like that's great. I don't know. Thanks for telling me.
Mhm.
Or like something like that. Or just being like, oh, okay, great. And then things would be awkward. So like those are my two options.
Mhm.
Um, so I finally like heart pounding, decided I was like, okay, I'm gonna tell her. And I don't even remember the wording, but I basically was like, hey, I think I might like women too. I think I might be bi. And you were so excited. Um, you were like, oh my God, like that's amazing. Now you have like the rest of your life to like be yourself. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And in my head, I was like, that's an option? Like, to- wait, excitement was an option? I thought like my options were like rejection or tolerance. Like, but you were outright just like genuinely excited for me. And I was like, I'm gonna have to talk to Helen about this one because I don't know what to do with this. This wasn't in the script.
Yes, I tolerate the fact that I'm so excited to be on this journey with you.
Yes. So yeah, that was also great because, and yeah, I mean, we've already talked about this so many times, but it was just like such a great introduction to coming out because it was like, oh, that's people can be like excited.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I'm still excited to this day because we've had so many years of figuring it out and trying to discover what's going on in your head and in your inner voice and which way you want to go and what you want to explore. And once you've explored, what your reactions to it were. Like, I have actively stuck to that and have been on this journey with you since you told me.
Yeah, which I appreciate and I'm so grateful to you for.
And look at how far we've come. Both of us
Still confused.
almost completely comfortable in our confusion.
Just living life.
Living, doing the best we can with what we've got. And the more answers we have, the more confused we get because it just leads to more possibilities of how we can exist in the world.
I know. And it's like each new insight I have, it's like, oh, well, it's obvious. How did I not figure that out before? And then I just think like a few years I'm gonna have a new insight, but I'm gonna be like, wow, wow, look at that. So yeah,
Mhm.
always continuing to grow.
Which leads me to my next question for you, which is what was it like for you trying to discover your inner voice, trying to listen to that part of you?
I think it was I feel like it's been so gradual. Like it's only been within the last year that I think I've really had the vocabulary or like to talk about it in that way or even to just conceptualize that my inner voice was shut down and that I'm now like that I've been finding it. I think I think it's like I'm trying to even just remember like early therapy with the my second therapist. I'm just gonna say her name, Helen. I don't know what everyone's gonna. She's great. We love her. Um,
Thanks,
like with
Helen, for all your
Helen,
work.
yeah. Shout out to Helen. She's the best. Um, yeah, just thinking like I don't even remember a ton of therapy with her. I just think a big part of it was like confronting all of these negative, like the negative self-talk and self-image and beliefs.
Hmm.
And I think through that, like very gradually, I was unaware, like as I was like getting in touch with what I wanted or didn't want. But I think I was still very like out of reach as far as awareness goes. Um, and then
Okay.
I think really actually I did a yoga teacher training and I feel like maybe that was the first time that it was like entering into my body and like inhabiting my body. And I feel like
Mm.
that was a big part of finding my inner voice and discovering like what I like or don't like, or what brings me joy, or what makes me feel like kind of constricted or gross or whatever. And then now it's like being a massage therapist took that to a whole new level where it is about being embodied and about listening to my body for not just like, oh, this physically hurts, but like also looking to it for signs that I'm moving in the like quote unquote right direction, or at least in a direction that is more brings more ease and movement and like fluidity to my life versus like constriction and like shutting
Mm,
down. So I think it's been a very,
yeah. So,
yeah, physical process.
yeah. So, can you explain a little bit more? Because you're saying, I felt constricted in my body versus I feel fluid or open in my body, and I am more connected to my body than I ever was. So, when you're trying to listen to your inner voice, you're trying to make a decision, how do you connect with your body to figure out what it is it's trying to say?
I think it's a process. So like if you're, well, as I was for a long time, if like you're completely disconnected from your body to the point that you can't even tell like what emotion you're feeling or where in your body you feel it, or like there was a point like if you were like what emotion do you feel? I'd be like, I have no idea. Or
Mhm.
even if you ask like, do you have any pain in your body? I would have been like, I don't know, maybe. So going from that, I think if like when I started at that place, it was literally just checking in and being like, where do I feel? Like, what sensations do I feel? And not even labeling them as like tightness or openness, but just being like, what sensations do I feel?
Mhm.
And then like gradually building from that to like, now if I have like a big decision or something that's come up and I don't know which way to go, it's evolved to more of like, I don't know, not quite a meditation, but maybe just like a practice of sorts where I'll sit down and I'll now I don't have to attune to like what feels good versus bad as much, but um I'll sit down and like just check in with my body, kind of like scan head to toe, just noticing sensations or whatnot, like where do I feel my breath, where do I feel movement, and then thinking of a time when I there was a decision that I was like, yes, absolutely, no question. That's an absolute yes. And thinking of like what that feels like. And again, checking with my body, seeing if any sensations have changed, any other places I feel breath, um, and just noticing what that
Mm.
yes feels like. And then going back to kind of a neutral, like, okay, like, how am I feeling right now? And then thinking of a no, same thing, checking in, seeing what sensations have changed. Maybe I feel my breath in fewer places. Maybe I feel like a tightness in my chest or throat. And then going kind of back to neutral and then going to the decision and imagining what it would be like if I did the thing, whatever it is, and just noticing like what that feels like in my body and kind of having this like litmus test to compare it to like the previous yes and no. And then going back and doing it again. It's a
Yeah.
whole process. And doing it like,
Doing it
okay,
over
well,
and over again and seeing how it feels in your body. And it's like, oh, I feel more tenseness.
mhm.
This is probably going to be a no for me.
Yeah, and I think too, I imagine different people feel it differently. So like for me, like I feel most things like in my chest. So it's like it does feel like,
Mhm.
I don't know how else to describe it other than it's like lightness or ease or openness when things are like an absolute yes, or I'm excited about it. And when it's a no, it just like, I guess I also feel it in my shoulders. Like a no is like it feels heavy and it feels constricting and it feels like I'm protecting myself from who knows what. Um, and obviously there's nuance to that. And some things are gonna be like, oh, I feel excited, I feel some ease, but I feel nervous. But
Mhm.
it's definitely a practice of sitting and learning your own signals and being able to over time kind of find those nuances.
I think practice is the best word for it because you don't just flip a switch and suddenly you're connected with your body. It
Yeah, no.
actively takes all of these smaller baby steps of slowly reconnecting until you can get to the point of, I have this big decision. That one makes me feel weird. That one makes me feel good. I'm going to do that one.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not just a yes or no, it's really slowing down and sinking deeper and paying attention to all of those tiny baby cues. And you have to notice all of the tiny baby cues before you can pay attention to them.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is just like in therapy, it's building trust with yourself as well. So like
Mm.
even starting off with like smaller decisions and checking in with your body. So it could be like, oh, do I don't know, want like a coffee or chai tea today? And just checking in and like being like, well, how does my body feel about that? And just like over time building that trust that like you can rely on your body's signals and you can rely on yourself to find out what's going to work for you. And also being open to like, it might feel good when you're making the decision in the moment and maybe it doesn't work out and that's okay. That doesn't mean it was like wrong. It just means that you get a chance to like reevaluate and course correct and you have more information.
It is a constant practice.
Yes.
All right. So now that we've talked about your mental health a little bit, about your sexuality a little bit, about this insight you've had in your life, I want to change gears a little bit and talk more about your career journey and how you've kind of ended up where you've ended up now. And so tell me a little bit about what you first started majoring in college and kind of how that transformed over those 4 years.
Yeah. Also, my attitude towards
And your
careers has
attitude towards
drastically
careers.
changed, and my like my the way I view that is so different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I originally went to CSU because they were one of the only schools with a nutrition and a music program, which don't go together intuitively or even imaginatively. Um, but they did at the time, and I really wanted to do both. So I went in as I was like, I'm going to be a nutritionist, which might have had to do with my issues around food more than anything. But I was not aware of that. And then I took a few nutrition classes and I loved the classes themselves. I just was like, I don't want to be a nutritionist. That's not something I want to do. I don't want to be a dietitian. I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a music theory class and said, ooh, this is really hard and I'm not going to be a professional musician. So I'm going to minor in it instead. So I dropped that to a minor. I think I had like a panic with what I was going to do if I wasn't doing nutrition. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to your room and being like, what if I do this? And here's my pros and cons for switching my major. I think I might want to do psychology. Um,
I remember we talked about that at length and all of your different options and what you may or may not be interested in and what felt
yeah,
right.
yeah, I think I talked to everyone at length about it. I think that
You
also
needed to
goes,
process, it's fine.
I also think it goes back a little bit to what we talked about earlier of like having to outsource my intuition. So I had to check with everyone I even knew, just like casually, for some
Mm.
indication of what the right direction was. Um, so eventually I did settle in psychology, as you know. And
Yes.
then my goal was like, oh, I want to be a therapist. Um, which, all the whole adage of, therapists are the craziest ones, or they need therapy the most. Not crazy, but
What?
yeah,
We're all crazy,
that's true.
please. We all
Um,
have our own shit.
me too, for sure. So I did that. My intention was to go to grad school right out of undergrad. Um, but I think with all the processing I was doing in my own therapy and just school, like I got really burned out at the end.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a gap year. I'm just gonna do a little something else for a year and I'm gonna go to grad school. Okay. So then it was spoiler alert, it's been 6 years. Or more. I don't actually know.
So, not
Um,
quite a gap year, but some gap time.
yeah, almost a gap decade. I mean, if I just push it out a few more years.
Just a clean decade to figure out who you are and what direction you want to go in. I mean, really, you could probably use more time if you wanted.
You're right. What are we doing here? Let's just, no, just kidding. Um, so I ended up actually working as an environmental educator on Catalina Island for a couple of years. It was seasonal work, so I was moving like on and off the island every 3 months, which was exhausting, but so, so much fun. Um,
Yeah.
I loved doing that. While I was there, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go to grad school. So I applied to a variety of different types of programs. Everything. I think I was even looking at, I've looked at so many different options. I think I looked at like going back for another undergrad in art. And I also considered like master
Mm.
programs in environmental environmental work. I looked at programs for counseling. I got into a program for acupuncture. Basically, I just was all over the place. And
You had no idea what you actually wanted to focus on. You just felt like you had to go to grad school.
yeah, I just really wanted to go to grad school, but I didn't know what I actually wanted to do at all.
Mhm.
And then finally, I was having some health stuff, and I decided to leave the island. So I was going to stop
Mhm.
working as an environmental educator. So I moved back home with my parents for about a year and a half, worked at a coffee shop and then also a little brewery back home. Um, and I got in, then that's when I got into graduate school for acupuncture, and I was
Mhm.
dreading it, like absolute dread, not nervous, like absolute dread.
I remember you calling me like minimum once a week, freaking out about this program and if it was actually going to be worth it or not.
Yeah. And I remember too, like a big indication for me that I didn't want to do it other than the, dread,
Hmm.
was when people would congratulate me on getting into grad school. I was like, I didn't want to tell them. Like I didn't want to tell people that I'd gotten into grad school. I didn't want to tell people I was going to grad school because I think a part of me knew like I wasn't going to. And so
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell people.
Getting
Um,
in didn't feel like a celebration.
yeah, I wasn't excited about it. I wasn't looking forward to it. So it wasn't something I wanted to share with people. And so ultimately I decided not to go.
Mhm.
Um, and then I was like, now what? Like I have no plan at all. And I've always had a million plans, even though I panic about them and change them. I always have a plan. And for the first time in a long time, I had zero plan. Um, and then I was again having some health issues. I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and possibly endometriosis, unclear.
Mhm.
But basically, I had been having pelvic pain for over a year and a half, and a lot of other issues kind of surrounding my menstrual cycle. And I tried like all the birth controls, and nothing was working, or I was having side effects that I wasn't willing to deal with. And all of these people kept being like, you need to go see this woman, Janalee. She does abdominal therapy. And I
Mhm.
was like, sounds crazy. I'm not going to do it. And then after like the eighth person, I was like, okay, fine. I will go see her. Not that she can
Just to
help.
shut everyone up.
Yeah, like also at this point, like I'm out of options. So yeah, I'll go see her. Who knows?
Mhm.
Um, she was amazing. She put her hands on me. She hadn't done a single thing yet. It was like she was just resting her hands on my abdomen. And I was just like, oh, this is why nothing else career-wise has worked out. I'm supposed to do this. And it was
Wow.
like so clear. And like there wasn't a question in my mind about it. Like it was like that was the answer. And she hadn't done anything at all. Um, but the work was
That is
great.
incredible.
Yeah, and I was like, I feel a little insane for saying that, like, but it was so true and it was so clear. And I actually after that session I told my boyfriend at the time, like, I think I'm gonna go to massage school so I can do abdominal therapy. Because in session I had asked her, I was like, well, how do you do this kind of work? Like, what do you need to do to get there? And she said, you have to be a body worker of some type, massage,
Mhm.
chiropractic, acupuncture, something like that. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be an acupuncturist, as it turns out. uh,
That is not
so
your path.
that wasn't my path. So then that night I looked at massage schools, and then I think just a few months later, 6 months, 6 or 7 months later, I was in massage school.
With
Um,
me. We lived
yeah, I
together.
lived with you for a little bit. That was fun. Yeah, so I went to massage school, and I also fell in love with just body work in general.
Mhm.
And then
That was your aha moment. This is right. This is what I
yeah,
need to do.
and that's like one moment that I do go back to when I'm trying to reference, like, well, what feels like a yes? It's like that was a very clear yes.
Mm,
Um,
yes.
and so I fell in love with body work, and since doing this work, it's funny. I think one of my biggest fears about going to grad school for counseling was I didn't think I was capable of holding space for people or being with people when they're having big emotions come up. or like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I'm really uncomfortable with that. I don't think I can do that. Um, and wouldn't you know it, sometimes big emotions come up and people have really big breakthroughs, even in body work where we're not talking. Um, like the tissue
Yeah,
releases and really big emotions come up that had been held there. And
because it's all stored in
yeah,
the
it all comes
body.
back to the body. And so I realized through being a massage therapist that like I do have the skills to hold this space for people to like feel safe and to have these big breakthroughs. And like I just wanted more of that and I continue to want more of that. So I decided like, okay, it's time. Like I actually genuinely want to go to grad school to become a therapist and with ultimately the goal of in some way combining either abdominal therapy or massage into psychotherapy and bringing the body in through somatic therapy, EMDR, that type of thing.
Talking my language. We will definitely dive more into mind body connections, somatic therapy, EMDR, your abdominal therapy. We will definitely talk about all of that in future episodes because it is, in fact, all connected. And as we find out more and more about those connections, that insight deepens.
Yes. And I feel like I just gave you a list of topics. I'm like,
You
things
do.
that your listeners have to look forward to.
So, everybody that is currently listening, all like four of you, just kidding. For everyone listening, you have so
There could be
much to
six.
look forward to. Yeah, all six of us. It'll be great because I'm going to listen to it at least three times. Um,
I'll just listen to the episodes I'm not in. How about
I
that?
love that. Please listen to me talk. Everybody that is listening, send it to your friends and family because I want to be able to talk about these topics with Sadie, with everyone else that has said yes to being on this podcast, and just I want to share the knowledge. So please share it with your friends and family too. Maybe not your friends and family, Sadie, because I am your friend and family. Just kidding.
Yeah, you're the only one,
I'm the only
obviously.
one in your entire life. Um, no, I want to
Just
take.
kidding, that would be codependent.
No, we have healthy boundaries. We've talked about them. It's fine. Which was another thing to look forward to in this podcast, boundaries and how to pay attention to them and how to enforce them. Because we have this idea that we have to have it all figured out right away, just like a light switch, and it's much more of a dimmer. So we need to start small and build. And just like this podcast, it will build.
Yeah.
Yes. So, with that, I want to kind of bring back this idea of insight. And I want to ask you, because this is something you explicitly wanted to talk about during this episode, and I agree completely that it's important, that when it comes to finding insight, what is important to remember about it?
I think a big part of it is that um, number one, it changes. So the insights you have now, like they might change over
Mm-hmm.
time. Um, and like that's okay. And sometimes it's also like you might hear something or like me go to therapy and not be ready for a particular insight, but then later when you are, like it'll come back to you or you'll be able to understand it on a deeper level. And also that like insight, I think the reason similar to body work and psychotherapy, like the reason so many, or even religion, that the reason so many different for like ways of talking about the same thing exist is because like you're going to resonate with different things at different points in your life at or even just like with your own upbringing it's you're going to have a different lens that you're looking through and so different language is going to resonate with you differently at different times and so it's a very like fluid thing and it's just always about learning about yourself about the people around you about relationships about
Yeah.
being human um and it's a
Yeah.
process.
And so if something resonates with one person but doesn't resonate with you, that doesn't necessarily mean that that will never resonate with you. You just might not have heard it with the words necessary to hit home for you. Or what resonates with one
Yeah,
person won't resonate with another, and that's also okay.
and that doesn't invalidate the insights you've had in your own life or and it doesn't invalidate another person's insights either it's just a different lens to look through and it's like slightly different nuances or captures a slightly different angle
Yes.
I don't know it's kind of, it's just like the image that comes to mind is like if you had, I don't know, like a statue or something, and you had like 50 different photographers all positioned around the statue, it's like you're going to get a picture of the statue. It's just going to be a slightly different angle. That doesn't mean that it's not the statue in the picture. It just means that like you're looking at it through a different lens and getting a different understanding. And it's, yeah.
Yes.
And the more photographs you have or the more insights you have over time, the more complete picture you get
Yes.
and like more
I
understanding.
agree with that
Yeah.
completely. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why, I mean, I joke about this all the time that I just collect certifications
Yeah.
because I have my master's in counseling psychology. I also have my yoga teacher training. I'm trained in EMDR. I'm trained in couples therapy. I'm trained in ACT. I'm working on understanding somatic therapy. And at some point, once I'm done with all of my EMDR certifications I'm going through, I'll probably get an actual certification in somatic work. Like every time there is something that I can learn, I want to, not just for
Mhm.
myself, but because if I can increase my language and have multiple different ways to experience or define or explain a concept, the more likely I can reach more people. Because if I can explain it in 100 different ways, there might be one way that works for that one person and a different way that works for another. And the more information I have, the better I can make that connection happen.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, just finding that language for that one person or for yourself, like then it opens up avenues for other insights or other views because it's like you're very gradually learning more.
Mm-hmm.
And like as you learn more, you want to learn even more because you're
Yeah.
like, wow, I know so little.
And I'm kind of talking about it more from the clinical side of, I'm learning stuff so that I can help people, but there's also that side of you need to be ready to learn. You
Yeah.
have to try to understand all the different languages and be ready to hear all these different theories and perspectives. Because if you're not open to it, then you're not going to pay attention to if it works for you or not.
Yeah. And I think a big part, like what that brings to mind for me is a big part of developing insight is having healthy curiosity.
Hmm.
So, um, when you do come up against an idea or a person or like an expression of whatever, like faith or ideology or whatever, and you get upset about it or it brings up strong emotions, whether those are because you're passionate and it really resonates with you or because it really rubs you the wrong way, then stepping back and getting curious about like, well, where is that reaction coming from?
Hmm.
Like why is that my reaction? And just like
Yeah.
opening it up for a little exploration.
Yeah, the reaction itself isn't the whole answer. It's a piece of information that you can take to learn more
Yeah.
about yourself, about the situation, about what is going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, is there anything else you'd like to add about this? Are you okay moving on with to our final section?
Yes, I am all good.
All right. So, the final section, and we'll see how this goes because you are my guinea pig. Uh, it is rapid fire questions. So, one sentence or less, unless you really, really want to elaborate, because I love to talk about things, and have zero boundaries around information, as we just talked about. I want to take it all in. I'm got 5 questions for you, and just first thing that comes to mind, don't think too hard about it.
Cool.
Okay. All right. So, first question. When was the last time you remember feeling uncomfortable?
Um, I don't know why it's so hard to think of.
Because I sprung it on you, just like I said I
Yeah,
was going to.
okay. Last time I felt uncomfortable was yesterday. Uh,
Okay.
oh, you said one sentence. That was my sentence.
Well, okay, but I want to know what happened yesterday that made you uncomfortable. So
Oh,
I need
yeah.
to expand on my rules.
Yes, okay. I feel like that was like malicious compliance on my part. I apologize.
Wow, you're like, I don't want to talk about what made me uncomfortable, even though I'm literally on a podcast about insight and diving deeper into things that make me uncomfortable. Don't make me do it.
Don't make me do it. Yeah, it was basically I was just feeling what was it? Okay, it was time. Okay, again, I can't stick to a sentence. So here we go. Um, basically it was just like a bunch of stuff had been brought up for me from my past or like about my past that we all just talked about, so like college days and therapy and all that turmoil, because I'd previously been on a date where I had talked about all of that. And so then
Mm,
yesterday I was just kind of feeling a little bit raw and a little bit like just like, oh, I don't know that I wanted to share that.
yeah.
Yeah, so just feeling a little like uncomfortable in my body and just like a little bit like, yeah, on edge, a little bit raw.
Okay. This next question we kind of already answered, but I'm going to ask it again just in case you want to reiterate or if you have a different moment that comes to mind. Is there a moment of insight that you've had in your life that you remember vividly?
Well, the easy one is knowing that I wanted to do abdominal therapy. Um, it was just like, yeah, lightning strike of knowledge of like, this is what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question. How do you know when your body is telling you it's overwhelmed or tired?
For me, I think it's a lot of like tightness in my chest. Tends to be like
Mm,
the big one. Um, Although also apparently double vision is another one that I sometimes get. So
oof, that's rough.
yeah.
Okay. Next, what value or intention is guiding you this week?
Ooh, I like that question. Um, let's see. My so in my planner, the one that I wrote down, was grounding and embodiment in session. So that just means I'm checking in with my body while I'm giving a massage. Like,
Hmm.
how is this feeling for me in my body? Do I have good ergonomics? Am I hurting my back by doing this? Do I need to change positions? Do I need to switch it up?
I love that. And I also love that you talked about and explained embodiment and connecting to your
Yes.
body before I asked you this question. So
Yes.
our
Ideal.
our listeners already know what that means, at least somewhat, and we'll dive more into that in the future. And then last question. If our listeners could walk away with one piece of knowledge from our time together today, what would you want them to stick in their minds?
Think I would want this idea of like being curious about, I mean, life in general, but also, yeah, when you have a reaction to something, just get curious about where it's coming from.
Hmm. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for diving deep, for being vulnerable, for getting a little uncomfortable about your past, and for just being in my life because I don't think this podcast would be happening without you. You were a big motivator for me, and I appreciate you showing up here today as yourself.
Oh, well, thank you for hosting. This was so fun, and I'll be back in the future for sure.
Yes. In fact, we will have Sadie back next week because we are going to be diving more into what insight actually is.
I love it. Look forward to,
I'm
yeah,
so
I look forward to
excited.
seeing or I'm not even going to see people. I look forward to talking at people.
I look forward to talking at people too. It's much less scary than seeing all of the viewers.
Yeah, I don't want
And
to see them. I just want to
I
talk to
don't want
them.
to see any of you. Just kidding. If you see me on the street, please say hi. But otherwise, I much prefer talking at you.
Yes, ideal setup,
Ideal
really.
setup for the introvert that wants to
Yes,
be heard.
the introvert with lots to share.
Yes, I have so much to say. I just don't want to say it to anyone to their faces.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as we're on the same page. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening and thanks for being here. It was such a blast having Sadie on the podcast today, learning about her life, what it means to sink into your body and pay attention to what it's saying, and getting a little uncomfortable. Thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. I appreciate you and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.